All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking a deeply fascinating look at a text that approaches human health from a completely different paradigm. We're going to impartially explore the very unique spiritual lens on modern physical and mental health presented in this work. We'll be looking at how everyday physical symptoms might actually be signs of invisible, spiritual realities.
We're going to be looking directly at Ryuho Okawa's book, The True Relationship Between the Mind and Body. Specifically, we're diving into Chapter 1, which is all about healing the mind. Now, the author makes some highly specific, esoteric claims about the connection between our physical ailments and the spiritual realm. We're going to unpack these claims purely neutrally and analytically, seeing exactly how the text reframes everything from bad dreams to major life events.
Okay, let's dive right into this. To make sense of all these complex ideas, we'll follow a three-part journey. First, the daily self, then the biological self, and finally, the existential self. Let's get started.
So, starting with Section 1, the daily self, where we'll look at dieting and dreams.
Take extreme dieting, for example. You know when someone deprives themselves of food to a really extreme degree? Well, the author asserts that they aren't just weakening their physical body, they're actually breaking down their spiritual defenses. And doing that invites what the text calls a hungry ghost, or an animal spirit. According to the book, these are hellish spirits with an abnormal attachment to food. Once possessed by one of these spirits, a person might experience sudden, intense urges for late-night binge eating or purging.
This is a perfect illustration of the core difference in worldview here. I mean, in our modern understanding of dieting, a rebound is just a physical reaction to a calorie deficit, right? But the spiritual view argues, no, this is actually a spiritual possession caused by a lack of self-control. And the author applies this exact same logic to mental health, stating that mild depression is often related to possession by evil spirits. The shared solution for both, therefore, is deep self-reflection and intentionally cultivating a bright, positive mind to repel these entities.
The text also applies a similar logic to things like sleep paralysis and terrible nightmares, viewing them as direct attacks by evil spirits. But here's the interesting part. The author provides a very specific, actionable cure for this. If you find yourself paralyzed in a dream, the text instructs you to use Tanden breathing. That basically means focusing your breathing deep down in your lower abdomen. By intentionally bringing in fresh oxygen and visualizing light entering the body, the text claims you raise your spiritual vibration, causing the evil spirit to instantly detach.
Moving right along to Section 2, the biological self, focusing on menstruation.
Now, the text makes a pretty fascinating assertion here about the nature of the female body. The author writes, women are, in a sense, spiritual mediums. Because the female body is biologically capable of housing another's soul during pregnancy, the text argues that women possess this inherent spiritual sensitivity and grace that differs from men.
So how exactly does this apply to the emotional instability that's often associated with menstruation? Well, the text frames these struggles not just as mere hormonal imbalances, but as spiritual handicaps. And these are purposely designed for soul learning. The author claims that the emotional turbulence of menstruation actually forces inner reflection and introspection. It's intrinsically tied to the sacred duty of nurturing life. And ultimately navigating this recurring challenge is exactly what develops a woman's unique spiritual sensitivity.
And that brings us to our third and final section, the existential self, covering gender identity and abortion.
According to the text, before we're even born, our souls actually map out a life plan in the heavenly realm. But sometimes things go wrong. The author introduces this concept of a planning error. This happens when unforeseen earthly circumstances, say parents only planning for one child or intense societal pressures, force a soul to be born into a physical body of the opposite sex.
This sets up a really stark contrast between modern medicine and the text's spiritual reality, where a standard medical diagnosis might view the distress of gender identity as a condition to be treated or transitioned physically. The spiritual view in this book dictates that the soul simply retains its original gender from the spirit world. Crucially, the author asserts that from a religious perspective, gender identity disorder is absolutely not a disease or a sickness. It's simply a spiritual mismatch resulting from that pre-birth planning error we just talked about.
This concept of pre-birth plans being interrupted naturally brings us to the author's teachings on abortion. And the text highlights a truly staggering number to contextualize this. 300,000. That is the estimated number of abortions that occur annually in Japan, a figure the author uses to emphasize the massive, massive scale of this issue.
For the author, this isn't just some physical or societal statistic. It's a full-blown spiritual crisis. The text asserts that interrupting a soul's carefully constructed life plan creates massive chaos and confusion in the heavenly realm.
I mean, think about it from this perspective. Spirits who have spent decades preparing to enter the physical world are suddenly blocked, leading to a profound disruption in the spirit world's order.
Furthermore, the author goes on to describe the spiritual repercussions for the aborted soul itself. The text explicitly states, "It remains as a scar on the soul." Because the soul had already prepared to live a human life, having that opportunity revoked creates a deep spiritual wound. And the text suggests this can even instill a fear of attempting to be born again in the future.
So the crucial takeaway here is this. Ryuho Okawa's text essentially asks us to completely invert how we look at health. From the food we crave in the middle of the night to our deepest existential identities, the author argues that absolutely nothing is purely physical. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought to consider. If our physical struggles are truly symptoms of a deeper spiritual reality, how does that change the way we view the challenges of our everyday lives? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this structured look at the source material has given you something deep to think about today.